Thanks for joining me. And I know that currently you're a student at Pratt, right?
Yeah, I'm a student at Pratt.
But before you had experienced two different startups.
Yes.
So first of all, tell me about the first one. What was it? What was it? And what problem did it aim to solve, and what happened?
So the first one was called PnP Labs, and it was around the time that you had companies like Gigster.com, and Gigster was doing really well in the US markets. So the idea was essentially kind of working with the freelancing or the gig economy. And how it kind of came into being for me and my co-founder is that essentially we wanted to kind of get into the startup ecosystem. The idea was, let's just go bootstrapped, and we started out picking up a few projects as consultants, and we were building things out for different companies. One of them was in the ed tech sector, and this was basically ex-Infosys employees who'd kind of started this off. It was called Liga. And then there was one in the healthcare sector, which was basically in terms of appointment management for doctors. So we thought, why not? What we saw while doing these projects was essentially when you were kind of consulting for someone and you're essentially building out a product, there's a lot of it that's repeatable in the sense that user stories, user journeys in essentially for different sectors. Like I pick up logistics or I pick up healthcare. I know there are certain things that are repeatable. And I know that and while working, I also know the kind of talent that I require to build this project out. One of the biggest problems that people still talk about is that how do you give out an estimate for these projects? Do you meet the timeline? But I felt that was one thing that we wanted to start off, and that's what we wanted to solve. And that was the first company, which was PnP Labs. Essentially, what we were doing is we were building out a scoping engine. What that would do is we had populated a lot of stories, user stories and journeys over time. That would essentially be your contract between the different freelancing teams. And we also had a team of curated freelancers that we were onboarding. So we were running this bootstrap for about 3 years. We were profitable, but the biggest problem at that point of time was remote work wasn't that big. Anyone that we kind of spoke to kind of wanted somebody in-house, despite what projections you gave them, despite the deadlines, despite everything. Everyone wants someone in-house, someone sitting right there. So that was one thing that was a big challenge. The second thing that we felt was this wouldn't scale like a startup. It would take its own journey. So that's where we felt that, we would start plateauing out. So we built a community of 750 freelancers, and these were people all across the globe who were working with us. And we executed quite a few projects, about 20 to 25 odd projects. One of them was in the logistics space, which was with Mahindra. So it was called Move. So that was one of our clients. And then there was Fish Chain. So we did a lot of projects at that point of time. And I think through that journey of 3 years, we kind of also realized the engineering process around it. There's a lot of tooling that you use, and it doesn't matter whether you're working with freelancing teams or whether you're working with in-house teams. And that's kind of what led us to the second idea or the second startup. Sorry.
Let me interrupt you. There's a couple of details that are missing. What year did you start this?
I think this would have been 2016. I feel 2015, 2016.
And what was the name of it?
It was called PnP Labs.
PnP Labs.
Yeah, the company was called PnP Labs. The product that we were building out was called Cloud Team.
Cloud Team, okay.
Yeah.
And you said there was a scaling issue. Can you explain the scaling issue a little better? Or a little more, rather?
I think the scaling issue from the perspective is that when we kind of went out to work with different clients, essentially it was that entire process of looking for clients, then you kind of go into your sales cycle, onboard them. And the other thing that we definitely saw was we were always seen not as a product company, but we were seen as somebody who's working with outsourcing. And we didn't want to be that. We wanted to be product focused because our core was around the scoping engine that we were building. So that I think was a challenge for us. And somewhere we did feel like, this couldn't go into that hyper growth model or that startup model that everybody looks at. We would be profitable, but it would just be like plateauing out in terms of how the ecosystem was at that point of time.
So what were the, forgive me for being less insightful than I might be, but what was stopping it from growing? I get the whole onboarding thing. Onboarding takes time. Onboarding is intensive.
Mm-hmm.
That is not. I guess it depends how many teams you build, because each team can onboard clients individually as long as you're happy with them and how they work with the client. That's difficult to QA. But what else was stopping it from scaling?
The other thing was the fact that we weren't essentially we weren't working with talent that would come in-house. When we said freelancing, we were literally working with remote workers, and that wasn't palatable to a lot of the people within the industry, because at that point of time, or even now, again, I think even post-COVID, things have sort of started going back again. But everybody wants your team, like even if it's a freelancing team, even if it's a group of consultants, they would want them to work in-house, sitting right there, which is something that we weren't doing. And I think that was also taking us a lot of time in terms of getting that acceptance with remote work, with people
Right.
working all around.
I agree with you. A lot of places are going back, but I think everybody understands what's possible remotely now.
Yeah.
Before, in 2016, people understood remote, but they didn't understand how extensive remote could be.
Exactly.
So if you were going to, it's 2023 now, right? So 7 years have passed. The world has changed. Do you think this idea could be taken forward again? And if you did it again now, what would you change to overcome the scaling issue that the impediments you came across to scaling? Do you think that's possible?
I think the first thing that I would do is we wouldn't solve two problems at once, which was like we wouldn't build the product and also give you like a curated team. I would leave out the freelancing bit of it. I would leave out the curated team bit of it. I would build it as a pure product company wherein it would just be the scoping, which would help people collaborate remotely. So I think there's a lot of potential over there in terms of building this out. And I do see a lot of companies who are trying to solve this problem now, especially with things like AI, with things like ChatGPT coming, wherein you're able to train models. I think everyone is kind of moving in that direction. And this is what you were essentially trying to do. Can I give a prompt? Can I say that, hey, I want to build a login flow? And like the stories are populated by itself. And this is what I take to my designer. My designer designs screens basis this. My product manager essentially runs his Scrum or runs any of the processes around this. So it's becoming more and more possible with AI and ChatGPT coming in. But I would definitely just focus on that part of it if I were to build it today. And I would not tackle the talent pool part of it.
Okay. Well, when you finish, you're nearly finished your studies, or you have one more year?
I have one more year to go.
Okay. So maybe in a year's time, you can revisit that if that's still of interest to you.
For sure. But I do think one thing that I want to revisit is the second startup that we were building out.
Right. Perfect. So tell me about that. What year did you start it? What was it called? And what was its purpose?
So this was, I think, 2019. It was called Kloudi. We raised a pre-seed round at that point of time for building this out, which was with Axelor Ventures. These are, again, ex-Infosys guys running a fund back in India, doing the entire Indo-US thing. And we also got a grant by the government of Karnataka for what we were building out. So that kept us going for a while. So this was essentially in the developer tool space. And essentially, it was the previous experience of building PnP Labs or building Cloud Team out, wherein we saw that within engineering, there is a lot of tooling that you use. Even today, you see that you look at the SaaS ecosystem, it's pretty much decoupled the number of tools that you use in a day-to-day basis in an organization. And what becomes challenging, especially with the engineering front, is that you are constantly juggling, shuffling between different tools to get your data points, whether it's something as simple, a simple workflow as debugging. It takes you more time than usual to first look for your data points in terms of, hey, what is it that could have caused this error to occur? And then you go through a lot before you can get down to fixing it. So what we started doing is we said that can we build sort of a conversational interface that unifies these tools and helps you solve. Just focusing on bug management, can we just focus on one workflow and then build up from there? So can we solve bugs faster? Can we make that interface easier to use as well? The other problem that you see with a lot of developer tools is that nobody focuses on the interface there. Nobody focuses on the user experience, because the idea is these are people with, a high, they're high on tech knowledge. They're like, these are the people who know how to code. They're always in front of their screens. They're doing a lot of stuff. So we probably don't need to focus on the experience. But at the end of the day, it is still a human sitting on the other end and would love to have an easier user experience, because it does take time to kind of learn different tools. It's obvious. It's even if you're the smartest person, you will still take some time to learn these tools, and every tool has a different way of using it. So we were also trying to solve the experience part of it while building this out, because we really believed that experience is what can change a lot of things. And we see that even with Chat GPT, right? It was not that it didn't exist before, but it was that UI interface that made it so simple and accessible for everybody to use. So we wanted to do that, and that's what Kloudi was essentially doing. And we'd build out a conversational layer. We'd trained our models to kind of identify different bugs and point you towards a solution. But I think 2020 was when the pandemic hit. Me and my co-founder were essentially planning to travel to the US, raise a subsequent round, build it out over here, because US is essentially the paying market in terms of all the tools, while you might build it out in India, but the selling happens here. But yeah, the pandemic hit, our travel plans were canceled. We were able to kind of build it out for a while with the funds that we had, but we kind of reached a point wherein we couldn't build it out, or we couldn't sustain it financially at that point of time. That's when we decided to shut it. My co-founder works with another startup right now. I decided to do my master's, which I'd put on hold for a while, and kind of build up on the knowledge, which was more intuitive for me, because I truly feel user experience is something which can solve a lot of problems. And as we are moving in the direction where more and more interfaces are digital and there are newer things coming in, like problems can be solved, accessibility can be solved for using user experience, using the knowledge that you have. So I kind of wanted to formalize that. But somewhere there, that's where I plan to revisit the idea after my master's.
So you plan to revisit, and will the audience be engineers still, or will it be, yes?
It would be developers.
Yeah.
But I myself don't code. And what we built out with Kloudi was pretty much something which anybody could use. So you didn't really need your developer to kind of jump in and help you figure out, hey, okay, what do I do with this? I've seen probably somebody's app is crashing. I know that this is happening, or there's a button on the website that doesn't work, and I have to wait for my developer. So we kind of solved for that, because the interface was pretty much like, even if you didn't know how to code, even if you didn't know how to probably write an ls bugs command, you could still write something like, show me all the bugs in the last 24 hours. So as a product manager as well, this was where we were able to kind of make it low on tech and like high on accessibility with that interface. But our core audience, or our core ICP, so to say, was developers.
That's cool. So is that gone, or can you resurrect it at some time in the future?
We can resurrect it. It's not completely gone.
Okay, that's very cool. So given your So I've got two more questions. We got about 13 minutes left. So first question is, what have you learned? Like, what are mistakes that you wouldn't make again? So if you were starting out again, and it sounds like you're a serial entrepreneur in the making, and you are going to do another startup come hell or high water. So what mistakes, what do you think you did well, and what do you think you should avoid next time?
I think what we did well was the way we built out the product. And I mean, the kind of roadmap that we took is something that still stands. The reason that we know that we can resurrect it at any point is because we had like a solid foundation with that product. And I think that was the good part of it. I think what I could have done better, or what both of us could have done better as co-founders, is that the realization that, you know, when, as much as we are passionate about the product, as much as we know, I mean, it's high on engineering, it takes its own time, and developer tools is a whole other ball game altogether in terms of building a business. One thing that we did late is we started out focusing on the Indian market, and it took us a while to realize that you might find users to build a product with in terms of the SaaS ecosystem in India, but you will not find paying users there. Paying users are in the US market. So day one, that's where you start doing things. That's where you start building it. And as much as I've been here as well right now, I realize it even more, because I mean, I'm always meeting a lot of other founders. I still go to events wherein I see what people are doing, what they're building. And I realized that, you know, that's one thing that we should have done on day one and not waited for 9 months before we realized, hey, we need to go to the US markets. Hey, that's where we need to build it out. So I think that's something that we would change for sure.
Okay. So what about the fundraising and the who had control? Because there's always a dynamic between having power and having money. So you can have all the power in the world, but you have no money, so you have no leverage, you can't do anything. Or you can have enough money to do stuff, but then other people are telling you what to do. So I think both of these, right, the first one was bootstrapped. I'm presuming that was part of the reason why. The PnP Labs, it sounds like that was bootstrapped. Did you raise funds at any point for that one?
No, we didn't. We were bootstrapped through and through.
Okay, and then the second one, the Kloudi, that one you had money from the beginning from two sources. So how did that influence your decision making? And do you think you did a good job in terms of managing the investor and managing the investor relation?
For sure. I mean, I think with the second one, the government one was a grant. So we were essentially just answerable in terms of milestones, in terms of what we were achieving. So it was pretty much us kind of projecting the roadmap and achieving that and then working with it. So there was no sort of investor relation management there. But we did have with Axelor, it was pretty much management of relations with the investors. I think we were lucky that our investors were really good. They really believed in us to the extent that they know, I mean, I still have chat with my investors, and they keep asking me, hey, when are you resurrecting Kloudi? Because we would like you to kind of build it out. And they had faith in the idea at that point of time, and they still do, which is a rarity that you would find in this industry, because essentially it is that the relationship between startups and VCs, as much as we like to kind of, paint a very nice picture about it, at the end of the day, it is financial transactions. It's them betting on you, making profits. And that's how it goes, right? But the good part is we had good investors. I would still go back to them whenever I decide to kind of resurrect it. So that way it was good. They gave us the bandwidth. They had faith in the way that we were kind of taking the direction. I think one thing that they kept pushing us for was start in the US from the very beginning. And we were the ones who kind of delayed that decision, but they were right about it. And we should have listened to them.
Well, lesson learned, right?
Yeah, that's the lesson learned for us.
Yeah. So what other, one other thing about the Axelon is how often did you check in with them? Or
Uh,
how
we
often did they check in with you?
we would have I think this was once in 3 weeks is when we would have a check-in with them, or like, I mean, the initial month was a little bit more frequent, but then it was just like once in 3 weeks or like once in a month sort of a thing, wherein we would have like a formal check-in, but then the partner who was kind of working with us closely on and off, like in case, he was just passing by, so we would meet up. But I mean, the formal one was more than once in a month sort of a check-in.
Okay, that's great. And what now looking at other people, because other investors and other future startup founders would definitely benefit from your advice. So what would if you were starting if you were fresh, I mean you're seasoned now, but if you were fresh and you were starting up a new venture, what advice would you appreciate the most if this was your first time building a company with hopefully high risk, high growth?
Yeah.
What would you do? What are the things you would advise them if they're in the US or if they're in India or anywhere else?
I think I would say two things. One, don't wait for perfection. Whatever shape or form your product is in, take it out, talk to people, talk to users, anybody. Don't just shy away. There's nothing that's going to be perfect. The more you keep delaying it, there's something that you find missing in it, and it'll never go out into the market. So whatever you have, whatever shape or form it's in, take it out, see what feedback you get, and listen to your users and build it out. And the second thing is, your biggest community in this ecosystem are the other founders there. So meet as many of them as you can, because they are the ones who would help you out. They are the ones who would also introduce you to your investors. So you're found, and you can always kind of, they're also on a similar journey as you are. They know what you're going through, and there is that sense of camaraderie. So meet other founders, talk to other founders. It's always a great thing. It's always a good community to have through the journey.
Great. Okay. Well, Sneh, thank you so much. I look forward to meeting up with you one of these days in the founder community in New York. And good luck with your studies. What's next? You have exams or you're done?
No, I'm done. So I have an internship that starts out next week. So I'm excited to go back to work again. Because I mean, academics is slightly different, but then you tend to kind of miss being in an office and working. So yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, good luck. Good luck with the internship, and stay in touch.
Thank you. Sure. It was great talking to you.
Likewise.